This is Paul 102 Digital Monday. On a Monday, Karen Nunez Tesheira is the host of Hard Talk right here at Paul 102 Digital. And today we are expecting a special guest in the person of Kevin Ramnarine. And of course, Karen is here with us. Good afternoon, Karen.
Good afternoon to you, David. Good afternoon to all your listeners, those who are very faithful. And the new ones, we always will love to hear from you. Call in, make comments, and I will try as much as possible to respond. Yes, we really do have a special guest because I don't think I could have thought of anyone more suited to deal with the issue of the energy sector, which is a very broad sector. It's not just natural gas as we tend to focus on, but it's more than that. And so I've asked him, and he immediately responded in the positive, that he would join us and share, because this is all about sharing our knowledge and sharing with you, the listeners, so that we have a better insight as to the state of our economy, because the Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister, and so we go, and we all know, but we take it from them, that we are an energy-based economy. So if the energy sector is in decline, then we know that that our economy is also in decline. So it's a very important subject for us to talk about, and there's no one better to do that than Kevin Ramnarine. So let me just do the formal part that I like to do. I know everyone is must, if they read a newspaper, watch television, or not living under a rock in Trinidad, they know Mr. Kevin Ramnarine. And I think he was highly respected as a Minister of Energy. I have to say that. And I can just say to the listeners that oftentimes when I didn't even know him, but he was so approachable and so knowledgeable that I would call him. I got his number and I'd call him. And every single time he'd take the time to explain things that had to do with energy sector, and made so many things far more, comprehensible, I should say, for me, especially in the early days, not as a minister, because I was not Minister of Energy, but certainly trying to have a greater insight and knowledge of really a specialist area. So let me just say a little bit about him. And I know that David is going to always there, it's very supportive, and have the numbers put up. I wish you all would call in. It's not a lecture. It's not a tutorial. I know it's not that. I know it's about sharing knowledge. And sometimes, I should, just before I do say or some of what but I'm going to repeat it anyhow. I was just listening to the end of that clip, and it was really true. Sometimes when you take on the challenge of sharing information, wanting to share information in a responsible manner, then you're made out to be some sort of traitor by those who are against it. And I thought that calypso at the end of it is very, very, very on point. So let me get ahead to.
I have Mr. Kevin Ramnarine on the phone, right?
Yes, this is what happened is that he won't be able to join us online and see his lovely face. His wonderful face, Mr. Ramnarine. But nevertheless, he's joining us as happened past.
Yes, getting loud and clear.
I know it, right. This happened a few weeks ago, and so it's happened again, and we just have to move on. It's no point, it is what it is, and we're happy to have you. So let me just say a little bit about you. So obviously, petroleum engineering is your calling because you did your Master of Science in Petroleum Engineering from UWE St. Augustine, my alma mater too. I like to see that because I take great pleasure and pride in being a University of the West Indies graduate myself. Also, Arthur Lockjack graduate, I think they call it the Global School of Business now, where he did his MBA, a business management degree, with distinction. Now, don't underestimate the distinction. I did it too, but I didn't get a distinction. I was told I missed it. I won, great, but we won't go into that. But to get a distinction, you have to get almost an A in every course. And then very few people who accomplish that in whatever graduating year it is. So it's not just an MBA, but an MBA with a distinction. He also has been a lead economist with British Gas parliamentary secretary between 2010 2011, and of course what we knew him for more than anything as Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs from 2011 to 2015. And since then he's been a consultant with a principal energy consultant with Triple Junction Advisory, and he does do volunteer work. And I consider volunteer work is part of society of petroleum engineers, but his volunteer work is coming on the show today because, it is volunteer. Just let me just put it that way. And when he's asked his point of view on issues that are repeated in the newspapers, or when they have the budget, and he's asked to be a guest on those shows, he is giving of his time to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and we thank him. So, Kevin, I think I know I can call you Kevin, and you, of course, call me Karen.
Thank you very much.
Right. And so I want to start by asking you your perspective. I'm going to, because I'll just say why I'm going to ask, because there's so many areas, and then I want to drill down in specific areas. But could you tell the listening public when we talk about the energy sector, what are we really talking about? Why is it so important to the economy of Trinidad and Tobago? Why does it play such an important part in our economy? And then we can drill down as to the status of it today and what are the factors that are affecting that. So I give you the floor.
Okay. Thank you very much, Karen. Thanks for having me again. Yes. So if you go back to 1962, right? If you look at the GDP figures of 1962, the year we became independent, the oil industry, as it was then called, or the petroleum sector, as it was then called, was somewhere in the region of 40% of our real GDP. So
when you say GDP, could you just explain that? I know, and you know what you mean, but sometimes just for the
GDP is the value. GDP is the value of all the goods and services produced in Trinidad and Tobago.
For a particular period, a fiscal year.
For a particular period, a 12-month period, right? So it has always been very dominant in the economy, but it became even more dominant in 1973 when we had the first boom, right? And 1974 was really the year that the economy really started to feel the full effects of the oil boom, and so that's 50 years ago. So you can really say that for the last 50 years, it has really been as we like to use the term, Karen, in Latin, the sine qua non, right, of Trinidad and Tobago's economy. That's Latin for that without which, right? So it's been dominant, and as a result, we have been there to enjoy the good times of the oil and gas industry, and we've of course felt the ravages of the bad times. So we've been through these roller coaster rides. We had a boom between 1973 and 1982. Then we went into economic recession, depression in the 1980s. Then we started to climb out of that in the mid 1990s around there. Then the LNG era came in 1999, and that took us all the way to 2008. And in 2008, you would know better than most people, we had a subprime mortgage crisis in the US, and the oil price fell, and our economy went down a bit in 2008 and 2009. And then we came back out of it again from that subprime mortgage crisis. And then the last decade has been a downward slide for the energy sector and for the Trinidad and Tobago economy. So we've been really, we've been subject to the roller coaster, the economic roller coaster that comes with being an economy which is so heavily pegged or so heavily tied to industry, which in itself goes through these global ups and downs, right? And I was just listening to a clip on another radio station of Minister Imbert talking about the United States and their oil production. And, he was saying that the US is now the world's largest producer of oil, and the US is the world's largest producer of natural gas. And 15 years ago, if somebody were to think about that, you might think they're mad, right? But the world changed. Around 2008, 2009, the shale revolution started. And that has had serious consequences for us in Trinidad and Tobago. The other thing that is happening globally that is going to impact us, and we're not talking about it enough, is this thing called the decarbonization of industries around the world, and the introduction of tariffs on products entering Europe and the United States for products which are produced, and in their production they emit a lot of carbon dioxide gas, like our ammonia and our methanol. Those things are going to have impacts for us here. So it's in terms of coming down to his budget again. Of course, the budget is based on a oil price and it's based on a gas price. And as you know, the Minister of Finance had tendered an affidavit to the courts back, I think it is in June 2024, in the matter of Dure versus the Attorney General, popularly referred to as the TTRA matter, and so on, where he made a case for the TTRA, or the introduction of the TTRA, on the basis of the fact that Trinidad and Tobago was seeing difficult times economically. And, he talked about a period of 2 to 3 years that were ahead of us that would be difficult times. That was then corroborated by the Prime Minister. I think the week before the budget was read, the Prime Minister at the Atlantic LNG function said, and there are various, stories about that. I think people listening to what he said.
It's not a sub the floor what you said, because that is what is at the heart of the issue, in my respectful opinion. I want you to address, because I actually got figures from the courtesy of I got from the central bank, and the central bank said the figures were from the Ministry of Energy, because there are three things that I think we need to face in Trinidad, because the whole thing is the future. No one, and certainly I am not saying, or no, I expect you are saying, that we have to abandon natural gas and oil and renewable energy and all those other things, because it's a different world. But this world is still dependent on oil. If you have to go by China and India, no matter what they say, Biden went back on his own word. I don't want to go into all what I could go into on it, because it's the whole thing with the oil and gas industry is volatility. What does that mean? Price. Look at the problems we have in this country. It's price, over which we have absolutely no control, and which obviously affects your budget, because they base the budget numbers. As I was Minister of Finance, I know that it's really natural gas, what you project to be the natural gas price more than anything else, and the crude oil price for the next fiscal year, which usually starts on October the 1st. Right? It doesn't have to. Usually fiscal year ends September the 30th, but you have until the end of October. So in the first week, end of September, that's when it comes to an end, the tax year. And you need to go to Parliament to finance the next year's budget. Without parliamentary approval through the Appropriation Act, you cannot do that.
Yes.
What I'm saying is that every year the government recognizes that its future falls or rises on not only the price, of which we are not price makers, we are price takers, but on the production levels. And the third thing, which this government cannot deny, it's lack of implementation in any level of promptitude. And there's enough data and evidence, not what I am saying, because I try to be very careful. Don't shoot the messenger because you don't like the message. I am relying on data from the central bank, CSO, and the Ministry of Energy. And I want to say something before I give it back to you. I said, let me go, after I got data from the last monetary policy report, which was published in July, was came to the end of May but published in July. And I went to the back where they have this schedule or whatever they will, that you use. And so looking at production levels for natural gas and the petrochemical industry. And I looked at those figures. And it is absolute. And you look at the Ministry of Energy. You know what I found in the Ministry of Energy? Maybe you could find it, but I shouldn't have to search so hard. But I couldn't find it anyhow. What I could find was they could tell me what it was like in 2014. Then when they could tell me about what is the price of natural gas, they would go up to 2018. We are in 2025, in 2025 budget period. Where are those figures? When they say there's a data bank, you go to see where the data bank is so you can get the information and up-to-date information. It's not available. So how do you have any confidence in what they tell you? Because when you look at what is published from their own ministry, which is Central Bank, published in their monetary report, it tells you a completely different story to what they want you to believe. And and that is why every single year, except 2022, over which we had no control because of the Ukraine-Russia war, people hear it over and over again, we had a small fiscal surplus. But that expenditure has to be financed, When you're spending more than you're making, you have to finance all of these ministries and all of these obligations that the government has. It has to come from somewhere, and that comes from those bonds that they issue on the international market, and it comes from using the HSF, which they've been using.
Karen, I have a question to ask you as a former. Sorry to be interviewing you.
No. I want you to be free.
As a former Minister of Finance, right?
Yes.
You would know, and it's very important that the public listening hear this exchange between a former Minister of Energy and a former Minister of Finance, so that they understand how our country operates. As a former Minister of Finance, one of your highest priorities every month is to make sure that the Treasury has sufficient money to pay public servants, right? And from time to time, the Minister of Finance finds himself or herself, in your case, in a little bit of a bind, right? And who is the person that the Minister of Finance would call to get some sort of assistance the Minister of Finance in my time used to call me, right?
Oh, he used to call you, but I didn't know who it is to call. I know it's not good. I know when I say that.
I'm sure you would have called Minister Henry from time to time and say,
I never had to. I never had to because we had good times. As you correctly pointed out, when I was minister.
Show you how important the sector is in terms of. Of course, energy taxes are paid quarterly.
Right.
So you get this surge of revenue in I think March and June and towards the end of the year and so on. So the point you're making is it is very important. The production levels are. So I'll just give you some numbers off the top of my head.
Give us some numbers because I would like some numbers for the production levels and just say what should it be.
So in 2014, natural gas production was 4.1 billion cubic feet of gas per day. That is 2014. Today, natural gas production is 2.46. So we've gone from 4.1 to 2.46. That's a decline of about 35-36%. Significant decline. In 2014, oil production was about 81,000 barrels of oil per day. We are now down to 50,000 barrels per day. So that's another decline of about 35-36%, right? So those declines, in addition to the fact that prices are not always supportive, those declines have contributed in no small way to our revenue position being what it is. the Minister of Finance, I read his budget speech. I don't think, I know it was 5.5 hours long, but I looked to see where he spoke to the deficit for the fiscal year just gone. And by that I mean fiscal 2024, which was completed on the 30th of September 2024. In the budget speech, I saw him make reference to the deficit for that year as being I think a 3% percentage of GDP or something like that, right? But he didn't give the actual nominal number. Now, he did say what the deficit would be, or what he forecasted to be for the current fiscal year, which is the year that we're in right now, which is fiscal 2025. And he said that will be about 5 point something billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars. But the Central Bank Monetary Policy Report of July 2024 has a forecasted deficit for the previous fiscal year of about 9.5 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars. I think that that sounds accurate. It could be more than that, but that's the central bank number. I believe that the deficit for 2025, the year that we are in now, fiscal 2025, is going to be somewhere in the same region of 10 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars. I don't see anything happening on the production front or on the price front. There are some one-offs that the minister mentioned. I think they're going to be selling some assets and so on. So there's a significant increase in what is called capital revenue, because they are going to be selling stuff. He did mention an amnesty for tax amnesty until December 31st, 2024, which would amnesties usually bring in some additional revenue to the government as companies and individuals try to get a house in order and so on. But I don't see anything to change the deficit in 2025 from what it was in 2024. So coming back to the Prime Minister's premise and the Minister of Finance's affidavit, in which they both said the same thing. And this is not me saying this. This is Mr. Rowley, Dr. Rowley, Dr. Keith Rowley, and Mr. Imbert saying this, that the years to come, the next 2 or 3 years to come, the Prime Minister says we'll be out of this by 2027. I have a slight difference of opinion on that. The Minister of Finance, in his affidavit, he said the same thing, or essentially the same thing. So what they are telegraphing is that 2024, 2025, 2026 would be a challenging period for Trinidad and Tobago. And that challenge is really based on the production and to some extent the price of the commodities. But the big issue in Trinidad and Tobago is the production of natural gas, to me. If I was to drill into one issue.
Let me just confirm, actually support what you're saying before we make let me just say, I'm going to look at facts. I'm going to look at facts. And by the way, just going back to the one that you talked about, the 9 billion, what happened was he had put the price of oil at $85, and he had put the price of natural gas, as you know, at $5, and gave no explanation except to say it was one less than the year before. So when he gave his mid-year review, he realized that instead of having a fiscal deficit that he had expected of a difference between the expenditure and the revenue, was going to be a deficit of 5.1 billion. That is what he anticipated. That was what he had anticipated, because the revenue was going to be 54 projected, and the expenditure was going to be in the vicinity of about 59, which would give us a deficit of 5.1. His natural gas numbers were totally out of whack. There was nothing to support that $5, nothing except that he could use it to I don't know what would be reason. Anyway, I'll deal with it just by itself. But when he went to the mid-year review, he realized that as oil and gas prices were trading and our production levels being just what you said, yes, just what you said, and it slid. It didn't just reach 2.4 just like that. Over the years, it just slid and slid and slid. So I don't know what they're saying about how the production, and that is with all the small gas fields operating, the Perenco gas fields, the other gas fields that have been in operation, right? So they've all been in operation. What happened in the mid-year review, he then said, oh, well, I'm going to have to revise the price of natural gas to 350 something. And therefore, he dropped the revenue from the 54 to, I think, to 50, and he dropped the expenditure to 57, so that he ended up instead with 7 billion. So he did not, so there's never been a year except 2022, which has nothing to do with us, that we ever saw nothing but anything else but a fiscal deficit. And it's not just, you don't have to get it right every time, but by God, you have to get it wrong every single year.
There was a surplus in 2007.
I'm talking about since this government is in office. I will not, when we were in office in 2008, I think it was 11 point something billion surplus, but I'm not talking about then. I'm talking about this current government. Right. And I'm talking about they're running the country. They're running the country.
Historical perspective. But coming back to, so the issue.
So that's how they got his 7 billion, because he went to the mid-year review and had to admit that his price for natural gas, just like every single year, he always overstates the price of oil.
The central bank says it's about 9.5 billion. Deficit.
Yeah, it is 9.5 billion. But what he, I mean, I don't know what's going to eventually happen. But what he did is he adjusted the price of natural gas mid-year to 3 something from $5, so that he was able now to bring down the revenue numbers lower. And I don't know how he did with the expenditure to get it down lower. So to get it from anticipated 9 billion, which is where it was heading, to 7 billion. I think he took $2.3 billion out of the consolidated fund in order to increase the revenue position in the last budget. So all of those things. But you know what all that tells you? It just tells you one thing. We talk about energy today. I have the figures you gave. You have been very kind, because I did go to the central bank and I did make sure I got my data from there, from courtesy the Ministry of, I don't think it's courtesy, but it came from the Ministry of Energy. And what you are saying is right. This is what I feel compelled to say it. I'm not going to use 2015. 73. No, they say you'd have to correct me with this, because I don't know the difference. I don't appreciate the difference. So the difference between, they say, oil and condensate. So when they say oil and condensate,
it's the same thing. The same thing, really.
Oh, it's the same thing. Okay, well, if it's the same thing, okay. Well, then if it's the same thing,
they're both considered liquids.
Okay, well, if it's the same thing, this is what happened. 2015
is physically different from oil, but they're both considered liquids.
Okay, well, when in 2015, when 73,000 barrels of oil per day, in 2021, it went down to 58,000. And right now, you are right, it's something like 52,000, for 2024, it is 47,000.
50,000 barrels of oil per day right now, which is very low.
49.6.
Since 1937.
Yeah, but that's all they have done since they're there. The numbers, how are they performing? Well, because production numbers since they're in office have gone down each and every year. Not only the production for oil, but then when you look at natural gas production, I can go back to your figure. I went to 2018 because I was going back too far. And we are supposed to have 4.1 billion cubic feet per day in order to satisfy the LNG and the petrochemical industry. I took from again, this is central bank taken from the Ministry of Energy, that's the source, and 2015, 3.58 billion cubic feet per day, to 2024 to 2.4, 2023, 2.4, 2022, 2.6, 2021, 2.57. And we needed
it will continue to decline. It will continue to decline in 2025 and 2026. And so let's come to the Prime Minister said that he said by 2027 we'll come out of this, we will see some relief and so on. Of course, he is basing that conclusion or he's making that assessment on the Manatee project. Now, the Manatee project, from my information, would not start production until the third quarter of 2027, so that its impact in 2027 will be limited to probably the last 4 to 5 months of the year. Its impact in 2028 will be more impactful because it has a whole 12 months in 2028. So I don't think that Manatee will bring any sort of relief until 2028. And when it does come into production, our gas production would have sunk so low that Manatee will only take us back to like 22 levels of production around there.
Okay, can I respond to that too again? Because I am data driven and I also want to do with the petrochemical industry where the price is. But let's deal with what you just mentioned. You did say Manatee, so I want to do Dragonfield separately because Manatee, they delinked the Cocina Manatee. Sorry, Lauren Manatee. They did delink it in 2019, I think, or they were going to go ahead with it. Yeah, the delinking took place in 2019, right? And they said that it's 10 trillion cubic feet of gas in between Ilorin and Manatee, but we only have about 2 point something trillion of it. So the vast majority, 2.7, vast majority is on the Venezuelan side. But this is what they said. And that is why they made a final investment decision. Shell did, because it's not in Venezuela water, so they're not fighting the United States, which is why I want to deal with Dragonfield by itself. But this is what they said. You see, it's so misleading. They say at its peak, at its peak. This is from them, this is from the ministry. It'll be giving you 604 million cubic feet per day at its peak. But you know when it's going to start off at? 100, let me get it right, 185 cubic feet. When is it going to reach the peak? When is it going to reach the peak?
604.
Huh?
Yeah, it doesn't start. These wells have to ramp up, they ramp up over a couple of months. So it doesn't.
Right, so months or years? Months.
It starts in 2027. It takes time for it to get up to that peak you just talked about there.
Okay, so they're saying initial, let me not mix up, let me not mix it up. But the Manatee, I think they said that it would be 185 cubic feet per day. And then when the Dragonfield, which is separate, they're saying that initially it will commence at 150 million, not billion, million cubic feet per day. Eventually, it would reach 350, with 300 going to LNG and 50 to the downstream. So what I'm saying is the impression you're getting is that in 2027, all will be good in this world with Manatee, with BP Shell having made its final investment decision because they delinked it, and the Manatee is not in Venezuelan waters. But they're not going to get the kind of production. There's millions and billions they get in. And similarly for
So coming back to this whole, so 2027 is being held out as this year when, things will get better and, there might be a third boom coming and so on. In my respectful view, there's no third boom coming. We will have some improvement in gas supply by 2028, but it's not going to be reminiscent or, akin to what happened between 1999 and 2008, which was the second boom, and the first boom, 1973 to 1982, right? So, and we also don't know what the price would look like in 2027. Nobody could say, right? The two booms that we just referred to were volume-driven and price-driven. They were both volume-driven and price-driven. The first boom was as a result of an increase in production by Amoco, coinciding with a quadrupling of oil price in 1973 because of the war, the Yom Kippur War in 1973, and how history repeats itself, right? And the second boom was the increase in production to supply the LNG industry, together with a price increase. right? So we don't know now. I want to come to this issue of price, right? Because a lot of what we enjoy in Trinidad and Tobago as our standard of living has a lot to do with what's happening in the outside world, or the exogenous factors, as I just heard an independent senator say. We have pegged a lot of our future on gas coming from Venezuela. So we have a 30-year license for Dragon, which is Venezuela's gas, 100%. And we have a 20-year license for a field called Coquina. Mannequin is in Trinidad's waters. Coquina is that part which is in Venezuela's waters. That's a 20-year license. But we also have we have two OFAC licenses, which are licenses that were granted by the U.S. Treasury Department to allow for Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela to have these arrangements. And those licenses are subject to renewal. Those licenses are not forever, or not ad infinitum, to use some more Latin. Those licenses.
These are a lot of Latin today, Mr. Ramnarayan, sine qua non, and all of that.
So there is an election in the United States, Karen, in 2 weeks, right? And nobody knows what is the outcome of that election. I mean, many people are speculating, but from all the data we've seen from all the polls, it looks like it's going to be the closest election in living memory. So nobody knows who is going to be in the White House come January 2025 when the new president takes office. So those arrangements with Venezuela are subject to geopolitical change, right? So that's one thing. And that's something over which we may not have the kind of control that we think we have. The second thing is that the price environment is very interesting to analyze. We have a major war on the European continent between Russia and Ukraine. You have the war raging in the Middle East between Israel and all a number of entities and countries around Israel. Yet the oil price is struggling to stay above $70 per barrel. The oil price is, it's falling. The oil price, the general trend is that the oil price is falling. But yet we have all this geopolitical instability in the world. So the reason for that is that the US is producing a lot of oil. And new non-OPEC countries, new producers like Guyana producing close to 700,000 barrels of oil per day. Brazil producing about 3 to 4 million barrels of oil per day. So there is a lot of non-OPEC production coming into the world market, right? At the same time, too, China has not really shown the rebound from the economy has not returned to the vibrancy that it had before COVID. And there's a school of thought that the Chinese went a bit too long with their lockdowns and so on, and they have that has had a negative impact on the recovery of the economy, right? So China, which is a big consumer of oil, has not really recovered. And the United States, Guyana, Brazil, those countries producing a tremendous amount of oil. So that is putting pressure on the oil price, causing it to go down. We also have a global oversupply of natural gas, again, because of the United States exporting LNG. When we took the decision in 1992, when your former boss and our former Prime Minister, Mr. Manning, took that decision in 1992 to enter to Trinidad and Tobago to go into the world of LNG.
Thank you for giving. Sorry, Amir. I want to thank you for giving credit where credit is due, because people in this, he should have gotten in posthumously at least an order of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, because it is because of his vision and his mission and his vision that Trinidad and Tobago became a natural gas economy, the first Atlantic, first LNG plant in the Western Hemisphere in 28 years when he put it up, against much opposition, even from cabinet ministers and technocrats. The arrogant Mr. Manning. Thank God he had the foresight
yeah.
to do that.
So
Cabot Inc., which is a
1992,
small little company in Boston or somewhere.
When Cabot came to Trinidad and Mr. Manning met with Cabot and so on, the assumption back in those days was that the U.S. was going to be short of natural gas, right? And that the U.S. was going to have to supplement their natural gas requirements by importing LNG.
And they will.
That was the premise. And that was the premise on which our LNG industry was set up to supply the United States and to supply Spain. Now we are in the year 2024, and the U.S. is either the second or the first largest exporter of LNG in the world. The Biden administration took a decision to halt the approvals of new LNG projects in the United States. You don't know what will happen in the United States in 2 weeks. If you have a Trump administration, President Trump is going to lift that ban, I am pretty sure. And that means that the U.S. is going to even further increase its exports of LNG. So that could push prices even further down. So where am I going with all this is that we don't know what 2027 would look like.
No, but you know what? Though, Kevin. First of all, let me just backtrack a little bit on what you said, because I feel passionately about it as you do, and you are the expert. But I do spend, because I was in that office, and also because I want to make sure that certainly when I come on a program, I try to make sure that the guests that I have, I'm don't embarrass myself too much. But going back, let's go with the natural gas prices. It's also after the Ukraine-Russian war, where the pipeline was blown up, and they said it was done. It was not an accident, but I can't say any on that. What Europe started did was building up its inventories so that they would not find themselves in such a vulnerable position. Also, too, they also started reducing the amount of natural gas they were actually using, and as well as those are two factors. And of course, as you rightly said, with oil in China's economy has not recovered to what it used to be. But there's a lot of geopolitics at play right now. There's a lot of geopolitics right now. So what you're saying is really true, that if Trump were to win, it's not just a question of making sure dollar remains the king, but it makes sure America remains supreme. And in order to ensure that, they must not have to be reliant on any other country for its oil and gas until they really get into renewables in a serious way. But I want to go back on your assessment with regard to Coquina, I don't know how you pronounce it, but and also the manatee and the dragonfly. I want to hear I'm going to ask you what you think about dragonfly when I have made my comment. It is my respectful opinion. We have to separate the granting of a license from sanctions that America has used traditionally since you go back. Since I don't know, whatever, since they became in World War II, I suppose. I don't know when they started doing it, certainly Vietnam, and I have not passed in judgment. That is their weapon.
The Americans had actually sanctioned the Japanese in the late 1930s.
There you go. You're a good historian.
As a form of punishment to punish the Japanese for their imperialistic expansion in the Pacific. So, and
that is their tool of choice. That's a weapon of choice, and they do it with a lot of countries. So my point is this:
this is how they weaponize their economy.
Right. So I'm coming to us now.
Everybody has to use their economy at some point in time, so they use sanctions to part of their foreign policy.
Right. So and then a maximum pressure and all that good stuff. But this is my point. I'm coming back to us, to Trinidad and Tobago, because the Prime Minister, the Minister of Energy, the Minister of Finance is painting this picture which of course I heard Dr. Watson say, even if you get production, which you will not get it up to the maximum, it will take time. Even if you don't have control over price, so you might get production, and you will still not get the production that you need, because we need at least 4.1 billion cubic feet per day, and we're down to 2.4 billion cubic feet per day. So it's a lot of billions of cubic feet just to reach back to where we were before, right? So that's the number one problem. So even if you get up your production, it will not happen magically in 2027, 2028, but you don't have control over price. You put all your eggs in a basket that has a lot of holes. But the other thing is, I think people do not make the distinction between a license and OFAC. INAI and Repsol have been operating in Venezuela since the 1990s. They have been operating and they have been exporting natural gas to Europe. And they say the reason they can do it is because they have a waiver that was granted to them a long time ago. So they continue, and America and the Western world concerned about their own people, which is Europe. But coming back to the OFAC, the thing about OFAC, which people, in my respectful opinion, the license allows Venezuela, which is short of any cash, that's why it's a joint venture, to allow us to do this exploration. That is part of the agreement, and also part of the agreement, which was in the Gazette, that 45% of the gross, not profits, but the gross take from the exploration belongs to Venezuela. That is part of the agreement. But it is not the license, it's OFAC, the Office of Fixed Assets Control. That's the, you see that weapon? That's the weapon. And the weapon that they used, they gave it to Trinidad and Tobago for Dragonfield. And they gave it to Trinidad and Tobago for Dragonfield for 2 years. And to allow us to pay Venezuela in cash rather than in kind. Because as other ministers like Dr. Anthony Gonzalez in Guyana and St. Vincent talk about neocolonialism, he told me going back to the thing where you're telling people that they could only trade in kind, not in cash. So the OFAC license expires in October 2025. That's just around the corner. You see, Shell made a final investment decision? No way. Not only have they not made one, they have asked OFAC to give them 15 years, because no Shell investor, where there's, as you just said, trillions of natural gas all over in just right there in Guyana, right there in America. Why are they going to give Shell shareholders who are insisting they want a 15-year OFAC license? In other words, they want 15 years from the Americans to allow them to pay Venezuela for their natural gas that is taken to the Hibiscus platform and then NGC pipelines. They want them to be able to pay for their cash, and America has not done that. So all the work they're doing in Venezuela, and they're talking about that is the license. But if I am to read the tea leaves of what's going on right now, Venezuela, I cannot see, and if Trump comes in there, even more so, where Machado was not allowed by the Supreme Court from going up for elections, where the Supreme Court of Venezuela said that Maduro did win the elections, where Gonzalez had to run out of the country and run to Spain. I cannot see America that uses sanctions as a weapon of choice allowing Dragonfield, which has been on the table since 2018 and 2019 and 2020, and it's going on and on and on and on and on, right? I cannot see them giving an extended license, and that is why Shell has not made a final investment decision regarding Dragonfield, which they said was going to save Trinidad and Tobago. But they did it with money.
And you have to remember too that the Venezuelan community living in Florida is politically influential.
Okay.
In addition to which, there is Senator Marco Rubio, who is one of the senators representing the state of Florida, who is Republican, who has also spoken, very strongly about matters relating to Venezuela and so on. So the Republican Party does have a more aggressive outlook when it comes to foreign policy and so on. So we'll wait and see what will happen. The United States
But
also
what are you
has
waiting to see what will happen? Kevin, I don't
well,
understand. This is what I don't understand. Isn't there a difference between a license and OFAC? But Biden is there and he's the one that put in the OFAC. But even if Harris wins, it is Biden that would only give the 2-year license.
Right.
So why do you think, and with all the geopolitics going on now, what is going on in the Middle East with Lebanon and Iran with their nuclear power and all those countries that want to see de-dollarization and all the geopolitics going on? I mean, if Biden did not give Shell the 15 years it wanted, if Biden did not give more than 2 years, which is coming to end next year, there's a difference between a license and because no investor, unless they want to get blacklisted, is going to do business with Dragon Field unless America gives the license, relief from sanctions license. That's when they will do business with them, and they have not done that. So why do we or the media continue to conflate the license with OFAC? They're two different things. And the most powerful one is OFAC.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I think the point here, let's just summarize the point that you're making is that Shell will not make an investment that is, potentially hundreds of millions of US dollars with an OFAC license dangling over that investment, which could be terminated in, a couple years time.
It's coming to end in October 2025.
October 2025, yeah.
That's when it's coming to end. That's a few months from now.
A year from now,
exactly. You see them trying to make. To make a final. They have not made that but when it came to Manatee, they
would not make a final investment decision unless they have a longer OFAC license or 15-year license or something like that.
So that's what I'm asking. What is all this about Dragon Field then? Why is the government going on as though Dragon Field is going to happen? I mean, it may happen, and I hope it does for Trinidad and for all of us in the Bermuda. But why?
Nobody could say, not even the Minister of Energy or the Minister of Finance or the Prime Minister could say when that gas is going to arrive in Trinidad, because it is all subject, as you just pointed out, to the vagaries of United States government foreign policy.
Exactly.
Which could change radically in the next couple of weeks. All right.
But it's bad enough as it is. That is why with all the talk, why you just said it yourself. You know, when you do the budget, they're talking the energy talk. Why can't you come and tell the people the truth? Why don't you tell them where your production level reached to now and it declined? And the central bank had a big headline on it. The LNG, I would like to speak on that because I don't think I clearly understand how that benefited us. And I know they take 45% of the natural gas that is produced, and I think 14% goes to methanol and 14% goes to urea, the downstream industry.
About that. Yeah, those are about the numbers.
But I would just want to say one other thing because I really think passionately. I feel that we're being led down a garden path, and I feel the government knows they're in real trouble. And instead of diversifying and looking for other avenues of foreign exchange, they borrow on the international bond market. So all our foreign exchange is tied up in debt. And then they pass an amendment to the HSF Section 15A that allows them to have taken out between 2016 and the last one I knew of was December 2023, the equivalent of over 18 billion TT dollars, right? And then talking about how it came back to what it was before because it is an investment fund. It's not a fund for spending. It's a fund for investing, right? And using the HSF. That's what they're doing, and using debt to finance recurrent expenditure. Why is and just fooling the country that better days going to come? But where the better days come in when you don't have dragon field. If Biden didn't give it to you, think Trump going to give it to you? And even if
And
you
then,
the manatee and the Cocina come
Mannequin
through,
would be
not
in
enough.
the same situation.
Huh?
The Coquina Mannequin project, which is a BP and GC project, would be
Right.
in a similar position as Dragon, right?
No, well, what they did, they linked it.
Although
Virtually
Mannequin is
say it's like Lauren Manatee. It's like Lauren Manatee. With Lauren Manatee, did they link the Lauren from Manatee? And with the Cocina, what a mannequin, they link the mannequin from the Cocina. That is why BPTT was able to make a final investment decision, because the gas fields that they have exploiting are in Trinidad waters and not in Venezuelan waters. If they were in Venezuelan waters, it'd be the same khaki pants as with Dragon Field or FAC. Why they don't under why does the media and why does the Minister of Energy, the Minister of Finance, and your Prime Minister try to keep on fooling people as if the license and OFAC is not key? What is the position there? Why you keep on fooling people and not telling them where we are with the production level going down? That is the central bank. And when I went to Ministry of Energy website looking for data, is no data there. Why aren't you letting me know? Why can't I find out the real position with regards to natural gas production, crude oil production, prices which have gone down? Now you have to be more realistic. What is the real problem with Dragon Field? Why you could go with why don't you level with us? Because you know why? Because you refuse to, and because all your foreign exchange is tied up in debt. You're using the HSF to finance your debt, and you're fooling the people that in 2027, 2028, all will be good. I can't see that unless you have control over price. And based on your production, I know Shell and BP involved, so maybe the data might be correct. But look at the solar plant. When they're supposed to have a huge solar plant in 2018.
That has been, I don't know where that is right now, but that has been dragging since 2020.
Dragging? Just like Dragon Field.
The solar plant that is supposed to be in Bertrand Castle. So I will take a drive down there one of these days when I have time and see what sort of progress going on with that.
You know what they said? It's supposed to have started in 2018. The first reason they gave was they couldn't get the CSC, the environmental certificate. That was the first stumbling block. And then after that, it just fell off the radar. And that was supposed to help, so that instead of, you could have diverted a lot of the natural gas. Why so much of our natural gas going to LNG? It's like selling cocoa instead of chocolate. Why? Could you explain to me what is the benefit of the Atlantic LNG to Trinidad and Tobago as opposed to the petrochemical industry, where natural gas is a feedstock? And I feel we have the capacity to make much more there than we do with the LNG. What is
the argument? It's a long-standing debate in the energy sector. So where does Trinidad and Tobago get the most value for its natural gas, right? And I will tell you that in 2015 we did a natural gas master plan by Porter and Partners, and Porter and Partners, I believe, were retained by this current government as one of the firms that advises current government of Trinidad and Tobago. Porter and Partners concluded, and they of course did their economic work. They concluded that the best value for our natural gas was to be derived by manufacture of ammonia. The second best place to put our gas was methanol, and I think they had LNG coming as number 3 or something like that. So we get more value, and we also get more job creation from our natural gas going to the petrochemical plants in Point Lisas. We do get value from the LNG industry, but if you were to look at a fair and reasonable assessment of economic value creation, the petrochemical sector would be where we create more value. And secondly, Point Lisas has a number of spin-off benefits in terms of the contracting community, the contractors in Trinidad who do work in the Tufcos and the Demuses and companies like that who provide a lot of these services to Point Lisas. So, but both the LNG industry in Point Fortin and the petrochemical industry in Point Lisas have been in decline and in significant decline as a result of this, significant fall in the gas production. I'll just give you an example of something which happened about two or 3 weeks ago. The second largest methanol plant in Point Lisas, the Atlas methanol plant, was shut down. And Methanex, who owns the Atlas methanol plant, they shut down the Atlas plant and they restarted a smaller plant called the Titan plant, which is about maybe 60% of what the Atlas methanol plant was. And the reason for that decision was availability of gas. So the Atlas plant has been shut down, the Titan plant restarted. The other companies are running at 75 to 80% of their capacity in Point Lisas. Atlantic LNG, of course, used to be 4 trains of LNG. Now it's 3 trains of LNG, and those 3 trains operate at about 60 to 65% capacity. So we have had a lot of dislocation. So that fall in gas production from that 4.1 in 2014 to that 2.4 today has had consequences with plant closure, with the reduction in the LNG production, the reduction in ammonia and methanol production, and so on. So we need to get gas production stabilized and return to a reasonable. I don't think we will ever get back to 4.1 billion cubic feet of gas per day unless something extraordinary happens, like we get a big deep water project off the ground. But I think that we could get gas production back up to somewhere like about 3.2 or something like that with a lot of effort, right? But going forward, Trinidad and Tobago's ability to lean on its energy sector as a pillar, as an economic pillar, is not going to be what it was 10, 15 years ago. So what do we do?
I'm going to ask you something, if you could explain, because I'm really asking you this, because actually it is in 2014 they were boasting how wonderful things were for investors, right? They said there are 10 ammonia plants. They do.
Yes,
I think Yara closed. And then they said 1 urea plant, 4 DRR plants. They don't take much anyhow. And they said 10 ammonia plants. I said that. And now, what I wanted to ask you is the Phoenix Park gas production, which is the butane and I think propane and so on. What is the position with that? Because I'm not sure that I know.
Well, I would tell you, people have been expressing, I'm sure there are people listening who would like to hear what I'm about to say, because we did an IPO in 2015 and we sold the shares in TTNGL. TTNGL is a company which owns 39% of Phoenix Park Gas Processors Limited. And there was an IPO in 2015. And then
what is an IPO? Just in case people just
an IPO is an initial public offering of shares.
Right.
So that happened in 2015, and the offer price was $20 a share. And then the current government did something called an APO in 2017, and that was an additional public offering where they put out another batch of shares, right? So the public was invited to purchase these shares, and many people from all different walks of life, public servants, professional people, small business people bought shares in this company, TTNGL. The offer was at $20 a share, and the price went up to about $31 at one point in time. The company was paying, a reasonable stream of dividends was being paid and so on. Now the share price is $4.50.
Why is that?
People were, well, there are many reasons for one of the reasons.
You could say, what is your, you former Minister of Energy, so what would be the reason,
one of the reasons is the performance of Phoenix Park Gas Processors Limited. And Phoenix Park Gas Processors Limited's performance is based on the amount of liquids, the amount of propane and butane and natural gasoline that they could extract from the stream of natural gas that goes into Phoenix Park Gas Processors Limited. So two things happened. One is that we have less gas production, and two, the gas that we do produce is getting more and more dry, meaning that there's less and less liquids to be extracted from the gas.
Right.
I have written in the Guardian. I think it was about maybe 2 years ago or a year ago. I wrote an article in the Business Guardian about my concerns about the fall in the share price and the need for a more arm's length arrangement between the NGC and Phoenix Park Gas Processors Limited, because the
And what do you
NGC
mean
is
by
the
that?
majority shareholder.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, yeah, the NGC is the majority shareholder of Phoenix Park Gas Processors Limited, but the structure of the board needs to take into consideration the fact that there are minority shareholders, and 39% of the company is owned by the public, and by the public I also mean NIB and whoever, whatever other pension funds bought into that IPO and that EPO. So the board needs to be more reflective of the shareholding of the company, and not to be, as the NGC is very dominant on the board, right? So I would like to see, and again it comes back to this whole concept of shareholder democracy in Trinidad, which is something we really need to push in this country. In my view, the board needs to be more reflective of the shareholding of the company, and not so much a reflection of the majority shareholder, right? So
But
I would just leave it at that.
I take from what you said, though, and I agree with what you're saying, and as an eye opener. But I do take, listening to what you're saying is those are things that have to be addressed and will have an impact. But to drop to where it has is because you're coming back to the same problem: a lack of sufficient natural gas,
Yeah,
and
exactly. So what is happening now is,
and the liquidity in the natural gas is natural gas is now
so
dry.
I met somebody on the weekend who told me that they had invested their gratuity in
My
this person is now an elderly person, and they had invested their gratuity from all the years at work and so on, in this IPO, and today their money is worth about 75% less than what they put in. So
well,
that is it's something that I would like. I think the majority shareholder, the board of Phoenix Park, the president of Phoenix Park listening, you have a responsibility to your shareholders, not to preside over the destruction of shareholder value, but at least to maintain shareholder value, at least to keep people even. Is Warren Buffett, who tells his company every year, Berkshire Hathaway, never lose the shareholders' money.
right.
That's the one rule that he operates Berkshire Hathaway by. Don't
Right.
lose the shareholders' money. So
Right.
I think that I would like to see that share price improve. I would like to see that we continue to have an energy company on the local stock exchange, because we never had one.
Yeah.
For a country which was a country dominated by oil and gas, our stock exchange was a reflection of manufacturing and banking and so on.
Right.
So the thinking was that we had to have an energy company on the stock exchange, and so on. So I wouldn't like to see that decline continue. I think that's something I would like to see reverse. But the way to make that happen really is to increase gas production.
Well, that's what I'm about to say that, and based on what we just said, let's be realistic. But that brings me then to another thing that's sort of connected to what you're saying, because you're saying that, and I think you got an award, an international award for actually being the minister who oversaw the IPO and actually offering
Well,
the public.
it was really the Ministry of Energy and the Ministry of Finance, and I can
But
tell
you
you
were
what
the minister of energy there.
I was the Minister of Energy when we did the IPO. But
Okay,
when
so
the
don't take away your
IPO,
marks now. Don't take away your marks now.
but I mean, when the IPO, so we launched the IPO in August 2015. The election came in September 2015, and the IPO was concluded when the government changed hands.
I
But
understand. The work had
Well,
already been done.
but I just want to say that the TTNGL IPO, also called the Phoenix Park IPO, came on the heels of the FCB IPO. And
Okay.
there was a lot of trepidation, there was a lot of fear that
Yeah.
the mistakes or the shortcomings of the FCB IPO could have been repeated.
Good.
And I remember meeting certain persons from the PNM who were in the opposition. I wouldn't call their name, and they cautioned me about the repeat of the errors of the FCB IPO, and I told them that we were going to put things in place to make sure that that did not happen. All right, and we did, and we had very good legal advice. We had very good accountants advising us, and so on, and it went very smoothly. But I am sort of heartbroken to see the share price where it is today.
I'm sure you are heartbroken. You know, people may think you are exaggerating. Good afternoon to Mr. Rashford, Mr. Abdullah, Mr. Prasad. To really, I know you're heartbroken because, you know, when you have given a lot to your country, people may not realize it, but there are people who are getting themselves in politics and become ministers who really take to heart the responsibility to their country and to their and their countrymen. So when things over which they have to just look and see the devastation or destruction or decline, it is heartbreaking. So I want to ask you this then, because I don't understand it, and maybe I know you're going to maybe shed some light. So the Phoenix Park gas production, everything's just falling apart because and then let me just quickly say before, because the one I want to ask you about is the Proman sale, but everything falling apart. The petrochemicals, all of this is the feedstock, all coming back to natural gas production, you know, all coming back to natural gas production. I got some figures again, the central bank, these are central bank figures that they got from Ministry of Energy. So I did not make them. I'm not the author of them. And in fact, we talk about the Titan and Atlas. They said they're going to they're reducing their methanol production by about 1 million tons because they're going to the smaller facility. But when we look at ammonia, which you said was about number 2 or number 1 in terms of return for
it was ranked as the best option for Trinidad and Tobago to monetize its natural gas.
So when we look at this is the data I could find. I got out from the central bank, and it's in all of it is in tons. I'm not going to give every year, but let's say 2018 it was 4,870 tons. In 2023, it was 3,200 tons. When we went to urea, it was 6,638 tons. In 2024, it was 288 tons, and in 2023, 293 tons. The methanol went from 5,104 in 2018 to 2024 to 4,199. Urea, ammonia, nitrate, UAE, I'm not so sure I understand it too well, but it went from 1,386 tons to today in 2024 to 733. And finally, melamine, which must be like a plastic, went from, let's say, in 2018 to 249 tons, to 123 tons. Anyway, the point is, every single one, and by the way, I didn't read all the ones in between, decline in every area. So this was what I wanted to ask you. You explained in Phoenix Park, which I did not fully understand myself. Why would the government sell its 58% between Clico and CL Financial shareholding in the methanol companies, which are to Proman, when it seems to be for the sum of 347 million or 347 US 347.
You're talking about MHIL.
Yes.
Which is
Why would they do that?
The methanol company in Oman. Right? So just for the benefit of the listeners, Clico and Proman. Clico and Proman, or whatever they call themselves, Consolidated Energy Limited, which is an umbrella term for some companies of which Proman is a part, had owned a pretty successful methanol plant in Oman, on the other side of the planet, in the Middle East. And from what I've read, the government, well, and CLICO is under the control of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, would have sold its shareholding in that methanol plant to.
In that methanol plant or in its shareholding in Proman Limited? Because I was the minister at the time when the then, God rest his soul, Mr. Dupre went behind our backs, did not tell us that he owned between CLF and CLICO the equivalent, the majority shareholding in Proman, and sold it for some measly amount. And we found that out sometime around about 2 or 3 years after.
I think that specific matter you're referring to is now going to the Privy Council. So
I think, did they not come to a decision on it? I took part in it. I gave a witness statement. So it's two separate issues. Then that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and then there's this plant in Oman, which is separate and apart from the assets in Trinidad.
Okay.
Where CLICO recently sold its holding to Proman. I think that has been widely discussed in the Senate between Senator Wade Mark and Minister.
So what is your thoughts on it?
Well, I think I don't know why the government would have sold it. Maybe they were looking to raise money, or maybe it was part of the whole trying to recover the monies that the government would have put out in the CLICO bailout and so on. But it was, from what I pick up from the parliamentary debates and so on, it was sold to Proman, the government shares in that methanol plant. The exact figure I don't know, but I know that Wade Mark has been constantly raising this issue in the Senate here, right? But I mean, coming back to the petrochemical industry, numbers you pointed out, they are all numbers that people know. I could tell you this. I'm not saying this in any sort of exaggerated tone. A lot of people in Point Lisa, I talk to people all the time, of course, right? People in the industry. I go to funerals, people talk to me about their shares and so on. People in Point Lisas who are, in their late 40s, early 50s and so on. And many of them are applying for jobs with the same company they're working for, but in the US and Canada.
Yeah.
Many of them are looking at options for migration. So
what does that mean then? What does that mean about the plants here? Then are they closing down?
People are actively, I could tell you about one company that has a gas contract expiring in 2 years. And the workers in that company know that the new price that they will have to pay for gas in 2 years' time will not be a price which would be causing the company to be competitive. So there's a likelihood that the company may shut down. And as a result, workers in that company have told me that they are looking at the options for migration or to apply for jobs with that company in the country where the company originated from. So
I had
this is not conjecture. This is
I know it's not conjecture.
The actual real world, right?
Because I had someone who is an expert like yourself, but not a minister, not a politician, but a technocrat who's an expert, was saying to me that many of the companies have shuttered. Didn't say closed down, shuttered, and it's unlikely they would reopen. And many of them are going to migrate because, for that same reason, it's not competitive to stay in Trinidad. It makes more sense. A lot of them going to the United States.
We had, although Stock is not a petrochemical company,
right?
Stock was a service company. Stock was a service company that did a lot of work in Galeota and Mayaguari and in Point Lisas. Stock about 3 or 4 months ago shut its doors in Trinidad. Right, and I think the estimates I saw was somewhere between 300
and 60 something. That's true. I saw that too.
We're out of jobs. So so we have. I agree with you. I think the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance know what the true. I think they know the trouble that the country's economy is in, hence their telegraphing and their forecasting of the next couple of years being difficult and rough times and so on. But the question that really has to dawn on the country, and more so on the leadership of the country, and by leadership I mean today, tomorrow, down the road, is what do we do? If we know all this, then do we do nothing, or do we start to plan for a different future?
Exactly.
And do we start to plan if we are diversifying?
We have to.
Diversifying into what? And into everything under the sun.
There are opportunities, but let me ask you something, because we have limited time, and of course the whole, what anybody listening to this has got to see whether they like the message that they're getting or not, and they could whether they like it or not. We are talking on facts. We're not sitting up here making up these things, and it is clear to anyone that you put in your head deep in the sand, that if you think that Trinidad and Tobago can continue to rely on the energy sector to be able to ensure the kind of prosperity that we hope to recover to, then you are not being realistic at all. Of course, any miracles can happen, but I want to ask you two things before we have to finish for the day, because I think it bothered me. The sale of the refinery, where in 2016, 5 of 2016, apparently the procurement of goods, that's the Procurement Act, you had the procurement regulator who would have that authority to review the documents, the tender documents, have the authority if there was a complaint that was made with 550 houses and they shut that down fast, you heard nothing more about it. In other words, to make sure things are done right, because the current procurement regulator has said that she has received complaints over, I think, $5.8 billion worth of complaints concerning bid rigging, bribery, etc. And this is in the public space. This is public procurement. This is public goods. It's your and my goods. So if that's the complaints you got, you know it's happening, right? So what I do not understand, which the opposition leader did mention, and I'll say that goods and services do not cover real estate, which is why in 2016, 5 of 2016, they amended the Procurement Act, which needs to be completely overhauled, because so many things you're not allowed your car see, but that's another story. The sale of real estate and by any state-owned company, it makes provisions for that, but it also makes provisions that you need to have regulations. Now, when they needed the 1 million so that you could host an event without having the regulator have to have oversight over the procurement of anything under 1 million, he passed the regulations in 2 twos. Those regulations were passed. Up to now, and this is as far as I understand it, the regulations have not been passed, which is why the sale of this refinery is not under the oversight of the regulator, because the regulations have not been passed. And if it had been, I think the regulator would have a say in who would be the person or what would be the entity that would look at the bids, what kinds of questions should be asked, what weighting would you attach, etc., and what procurement documents would be required. As it is, the regulator has said she has been consulted, I guess informally, but she has no say in how could you 8 years later. That's why I say it's price, production, and lack of implementation. And sometimes I think it's not by chance. So do you understand why it is?
I understand. I just want to make the point that the refinery has now been closed for 6 years. Right? November 2024 will mark the 6th anniversary of the closure of the refinery. In those 6 years, the refinery would have depreciated in value, and we do not know the condition that the refinery is in terms of, was it properly mothballed? Has it been properly preserved?
So they spent $500,000 a month in preservation of the assets. That was what was reported. Well, I don't know who gets in that $500,000 back. I think I could guess.
Well, anybody who knows the refinery industry globally will tell you that if a refinery has been shut down for 6 years, it is going to be a very expensive exercise to restart that refinery. So good luck to all those who put in bids and
But why
proposals.
is it not being handled by the regulator? This is why. Why is it that
I
Scotiabank International? I have nothing against Scotiabank International, but
no no
if you
no
pass the
yeah,
sale of real estate should come under the purview of the regulator, and you don't pass the regulations, and because of that, because of that, it's Mrs. I can't remember
this is
Mrs. Khan. I do not
Beverly
think yes, that is something that should have come over the oversight and review of the regulator. That to
yeah.
me it's
And I
such an
think
important asset.
Mrs. Khan, is somebody that she enjoys a broad degree of confidence in Trinidad and Tobago from by people who know her
Mhm.
as a public servant and so on. She was a permanent secretary. So I think the regulators should have some involvement in
She can't
the
because
kind
the
of
regulations haven't been passed by the Minister of Finance. I'm not talking about the regulator, by the way. The only reason I mentioned the specifically is because she has come out and said that she has gotten reports of complaints totaling $5.8 billion, and they bid rigging, bribery, etc. That's what she has said. And she has said she cannot have oversight because the regulations that should have been enacted since 2016 have not. She does not have that authority to do that. So it's not her I'm dealing with. Is the minister responsible? Why hasn't it not been done? When he had to do it for the $1 million that they spent without getting the regulators authority, which I don't think is a bad thing. $1 million in the grand scheme of things is not a lot of money. He quickly passed the regulations. Maybe the regulations are more complex, but 8 years, and so we are at a stage where something as important as a refinery, because as you said, Kevin, I mean, we have not really been producing a lot of oil. It's years now. We go back to maybe 1960s when 100 and something thousand barrels of oil. We have mature oil fields. We are a refiner of oil, and we get the oil from other countries and refine it. We are just like how Curacao has no oil, but it has a refinery. So the refinery is an
and
important
Singapore.
part. And right. So you don't have to have oil to have a refinery, but the refinery employed maybe too many people, so it needed restructuring. But the refinery was a source of part of our energy. When we talk about our energy economy, refineries are the center of that. And to think that now we hear, according to the newspapers, of the three bidders, two of them have experience in the refinery business. One doesn't, and one of them is a local one, and it's called a consortium, but we don't know who is behind the consortium. I want to know, because it's my public funds, and the refinery belongs to you and me and all of us. I want to know who is behind that consortium, because with the Nigerian company, you could go on the website and find out. With the US company, you could go on the website and find out. I want to know who is behind that consortium.
Right.
And you know what that speaks to? It really, Kevin, you know what it really is? I mean, this is what troubles me. So it troubles me is this, that there's a lack of trust, starting with the train one that they say was gone on TV. I'm tired to talk about that. Train one closed and shut down. It have no gas. You're the one to explain to me compression, what compression means. That means you're going and using a vacuum to take out as much as you can, right? You sort of explained it to me once when I didn't understand what that terminology meant. So what you're trying to say is it's dregs, and it's not viable for big companies like Shell and BP to really invest in. So they had to shut it down, train one. So the energy sector is LNG, the petrochemical is the refinery, and it's all, everything is in a decline, and they want us to believe that everything is going to be fine in 2028 when they very well know that the person holding the thing is OFAC, and whatever we produce up to now will never return us to the 4.1 billion that necessary for LNG and for the petrochemical, and if we want to develop that part of the economy anymore. And this is what the story really is. I mean, last
So
question.
I just want to address my thoughts
Well, yes,
as we
please.
as we as we come as to what
Yeah.
do we do?
What do we
Having
do?
all this information, what do we do? Now, Trinidad and Tobago is close to two CARICOM countries, Guyana and Suriname. CARICOM
Yeah.
members. We have a lot of historical and cultural ties with those two countries, as we all know. And
Right.
Guyana is producing close to 700,000 barrels of oil per day.
Right.
And Suriname just got final investment decision from the French company Total for its first oil project, which is valued at 10 billion US dollars, right? And Suriname is going to take off like a rocket with its oil and gas industry. Guyana is already taken off and soaring into the sky. And we are here not far from those countries. By the end of this decade, by 2030, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Suriname combined will have a production of 2 million barrels of oil equivalent. That is a term that we use to convert natural gas into oil barrels. So we converting Trinidad's production into barrels of oil equivalent and adding it to Suriname's production and Guyana's production. What that means is that these three little countries that are CARICOM members would constitute a major point on the world map of hydrocarbon production. So if we know that, we have to ask ourselves in Trinidad, what role can we play as a country in the oil and gas business for 116 odd years, right? And there is a lot of services that we could provide for Guyana and Suriname from Trinidad using our maritime sector, because the Guyanese oil industry is offshore in deep water. The Surinamese is going to be offshore in deep water. And a lot of the maritime services to support those industries could come out of Trinidad. And that is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. We have the infrastructure. We have the deep water harbors in Chaguaramas, Port of Spain, Point Lisas, La Bidco, Galiota. We have the brain power. We have our UTT, our Maritime Academy. We have Trinidadians who are master mariners all over the world. We have, leading minds in the maritime industry all over the world are Trinidadians. This to me is...
Pivot then. You say we could pivot our role in this whole thing then, in the energy sector.
So Trinidad has to become to this part of the world what Aberdeen became to the North Sea.
Okay.
And be the focal point to supply to provide these maritime services.
Wonderful, Kevin.
We should become the fuel bunkering capital of the Americas.
Wonderful,
right?
Kevin.
So that to me should be the what do we do beyond our current problems. But that requires a lot of vision, a lot of planning.
And hard work.
But the ingredients, Karen, all the ingredients are in our cupboard.
Absolutely.
We just need to put it in the pot and to stir it correctly, and we could create that maritime economy to support
100%.
As far as Brazil. Right?
Absolutely, because we have some of the
big opportunity.
To support what you're saying too. You hear about a lot of Trinidadians working in Africa, in Ghana, and all these different countries in Africa, especially you hear. Probably they want to saying because we are known for our expertise in natural gas. And by the way, I just want to say with Ghana has over 17 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. They say they're going to ExxonMobil said they're putting up an LNG facility. That's number one. In the early days when the Prime Minister was not as diplomatic as he should have been, I'm sure he's sorry he wasn't, unlike Mia Mottley was. They said, this is what I added in thing. They said, one, they don't want to allow LNG plant because it's old. They don't want a refinery. They're building their own, and they already have a contract, an MOU with, I can't remember the name of the country. They have an MOU with them. In other words, they treated us with the disdain which we deserve to be treated with in the early days when we didn't think we should go to their conference and go to Europe conference because it hurt us as Trinidadians to see Guyana with a country of 800 and something thousand people who can more than feed themselves and could be the food basket for this whole region and really have a CARICOM that was meant to be the kind of small-mindedness. And I think what you've said today, Kevin, I'm going to give you the last words. It's 10 minutes. I really want to ask you about transfer pricing, which you've been talking about. I talked about it too, to be honest. But nothing was done about that.
Well, I would just summarize by saying that
summarize it.
I think we have collectively defined the problem.
Yes.
And as you said, we cannot expect the energy sector to take us into the future as it has done. It will still be there. It will still be a feature of our economy, a significant part. But we have to devise. We have to upgrade according to a speech I heard recently from a learned judge. We have to upgrade our thinking because our responsibility to make this country a better place requires that we upgrade our thinking. And we have to determine what could we do that propels us forward. That is not necessarily related to drilling for oil and gas.
Exactly. So we have to look but still in the energy sector.
That maritime sector. And we have to look at the whole retooling of our education system because, I have been using AI over the weekend and it is remarkable, right? So we have to align our young people in that direction. And I think there's a lot of opportunity and potential for Trinidad still. I don't think it's all doom and gloom, but I think
that's not the topic today. I mean, the topic today could have been a broad topic, but we focus on energy. And what you said with UTT, I know a lot of young people who have degrees in petroleum, but not engineering, but it must be that. But in that field, they can't get a job because there's no jobs to be had.
Engineering and so on, yeah.
Right. UTT has done a fantastic job with that. We have Arthur Lockjaw Global School of Business. There's so many, and we have the experience and the know-how. And what I think I hear you saying is take a head out of it, but you see the leadership is not there. It's just not there because they will not be honest with the people and they're not willing to do the hard work and doing optics. But that's my view. And I don't think unless something happens, I wish it were different. But I think what you have said has really, without going into the other areas, we could go into a lot of things like agri and agribusiness, tourism, which is the lifeblood of a lot of our CARICOM country neighbors who, after 2020, their economies did recover significantly because of tourism. So don't underestimate the power of tourism in Trinidad. Not the same as theirs, but we can have our own brand. I call it cultural tourism. But what I'm saying is, in agri and agriculture, I mean, look at Ghana. I used to go to Ghana in a capacity that was a formal capacity, and I met with the then Attorney General a few years back, and he was saying we need to have a law school here because we have so much food. We are like a food basket, but it's true. It's true. And they have in the CARICOM document, by 2025, we should be producing 25% of our own food. But what are we doing? Increasing our food bill from 5 billion to 7.3 billion. So there's so much to be said, but I think with the energy, I think what you said is absolutely fantastic, Kevin. I think it is. And I just want to read one comment somebody said, and the last 7 minutes, I will leave it to you. Someone said, very informative. Thanks to the both of you for bringing these facts to the wider public attention. And I think, I'm sure I speak for Kevin, it is our honor and privilege to do that. So, Kevin, you can finish energy.
I don't think I have enough to say in 7 minutes, but I would say that there is a lot of potential to right-side the country's economy and to keep it moving in a path of prosperity. We've had what I call a lost decade, 2015 to 2024. The economy contracted by 19% in that period, and that
Yes.
contraction was largely because of oil and gas production falling. Yes, we did have the COVID period too. I mean, I can't discount the fact that we had two years of economic downturn because of COVID. But we have to now put all that behind us and say, what is the road? What is the way forward? And that's something I don't hear too much discussion about. What to do? You know, and we have to look at the diversification seriously. Maritime is but one area. There are other areas. You mentioned agriculture, and there's also tourism.
Agribusiness, like how you go downstream with the petrochemical, take the natural gas and use it to create from cocoa to chocolate. I always use that example. Take the cocoa and make chocolate.
And very importantly, I mean, we have to reform the public service. We have we have to look at the whole issue of the education of young people. We still educating people for the 20th century, Karen. Whereas people now have to be educated for the 21st century. We still operate in some of our education system still looks very colonial, right? In terms of its, whereas Britain and the other colonial countries have gone into the 21st century with their education. So, but there's a lot of work to do. But the right siding of Trinidad and Tobago is not beyond.
It's not going to happen under this government and not under this leadership. I'm telling you, they've gotten 10 years to do it and they haven't done it. Can I just?
I don't think they will. I don't think if they get 10 more years, they will do it.
Oh, right? God, well, I'm sorry for the country. And I just want to give leave because I love data, because you see, when I give data, don't argue with me. Go and argue with Central Bank and CSO, don't argue with me. So I want to support what you're saying, that all is not lost, that Trinidad and Tobago can find other means of creating wealth and dealing with the income inequality gap and creating social and economic prosperity. Let me just give you this data that came from one of the budgets, and it came from the monetary report from the central bank. So just to show you, remember you mentioned 2020, it was a hard year. So let me read this out for you. For the real GDP, which is you take it into account, real GDP is if you take into account that the price of goods went up because the cost went up, the purchasing price of the goods went up, but you factor that into the value of the goods and services you produce for the year. We don't have time to get into the description, but let us look at Trinidad. In 2020, we were negative 9.1 in real GDP, in terms of our gross domestic product. Then in 2021, it was negative 1.0. 2022, 1.5 positive. And then in 2023, negative 3.5. And I think it is projected if for 2024 it's a negative 2.3 as of June of 2024, if I read the central bank right. But look at this, Barbados. In 2020, negative 12.7 like the rest of us. In 2021, negative 1.3, 2022, 13.8, 2023, 4.4, 2024, 3.9. The Eastern Caribbean countries, negative 16.3 in 2020, like all of us. 2021, quick recovery, 5.5. 2022, 8.9. 2023, projected 4.5. And 2024, 5.2. Jamaica, negative 10% that the economy declined. By 2021, it grew by 4.4. 2022, 5.4. 2023 projected 0.6.
I have to double check these numbers. I'm not disagreeing with your numbers, but okay. I want to check Trinidad and Tobago's.
All right.
I want to believe that we have not returned to the 2019 level of GDP in 2024.
Yeah, IMF said that we had negative 90% growth between 2016 and 2020, whatever it is. I mean, let me just see. I think we were on the same page. It's 5:59. David, you listened to us. And this person who did not give his name, but I really do thank you for what you said, because that's exactly why we come on every Monday. And we have people like Kevin, who's a fantastic guest and has been very patient with me, because I I'm so passionate about our country and passionate about our people. And I just see that what we are experiencing, we don't have to have. It doesn't have to be so. It does not have to be so. And Kevin, I would love to see you back in the saddle.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And we have to go. David, anything you want to say before we
whatever is
leave?
the will of God. Thank you very much, Karen.
Sine qua non. He knows why I told him that, because I met him somewhere and he said to me, sine qua non. I said, using Latin phrase. David, anything you want to say before we leave?
No, this is very informative, and of course, I appreciate all what Kevin is saying. I think it's about time we have the kind of leadership that will take us into the future, and not that kind of quasi-colonial kind of way of doing things.
All righty then.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Good
thank you
evening.
so much,
Thank you again, Kevin. Bye-bye. And good night, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night. Okay.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
great. That brings us to the end of Hard Talk for today. Power 102 Digital Monday with host Karen Nunez. Karen will be back next Monday with another informative edition of Hard Talk right here at Power 102 Digital.